Hi, and welcome to BestMyTest. In today's video, we are going to dig into the TOEFL Integrated Speaking Task 6. Different from Integrated Speaking Task 4, where you get to read a passage about an academic topic before listening to the lecture, for this task, you have no knowledge of the lecture before it starts, which means you are going to solely rely on your listening skills to understand the content. A lot of students feel this task is the most difficult task in the TOEFL exam, but don't worry. With proper training and practice, we believe you will do great. Okay, the format here is rather simple. At first, you will have to listen to a short part of a lecture. After that, you will be asked a question for which you then have 20 seconds to prepare your answer. Then you will be given 60 seconds for your response. In the beginning, I want to talk a little bit more about the content of these lectures. Usually, the lectures are part of a university class with topics often covering these subjects here: biology, geology, psychology, business and marketing, economics, and history. Of course, the list can go on and on, but these are the most common ones you will encounter. In the beginning of the lecture, the professor usually just goes straight into the main topic, so you will need to be focused on the get-go. The main concept is often followed by two subtopics or two examples to further explain the main concept. Let me show you some example questions so that you know what I mean. As I said, there are lectures where two different aspects or subtopics of a bigger topic are discussed, and the questions could go like this. Using the main point and examples from the lecture, describe the two ways of discovering an invention. Other questions may ask you for the following. Describe two adaptations that the Arctic butterfly has developed for cold climates. Or describe slump and creep. Or describe two negative impacts of logos. And here are some questions that ask you to explain the concept mentioned in the lecture together with the two examples provided by the professor. Using two examples from the lecture, describe camouflage. Using two examples from the lecture, describe ecological succession. Using two examples from the lecture, describe the relationship between biodiversity and ecosystem restoration. In today's video, we look at samples for both types of questions. Now, let's quickly go over the structure of your response. The response should include the following: the explanation of the topic, the first example or the first concept, the second example or the second concept, and a conclusion. It's important to remember that you are discussing an academic topic and not an opinion. Therefore, please avoid using sentences like "I think" or "in my opinion", as your personal opinions are irrelevant for this question style and will most likely lead to a deduction of points. Now that we know the structure and the format of this task, let's look at a sample question.
Today I want to talk about an interesting plant, the alpine plant. They grow in alpine climates, which is above the tree line. Unlike lower elevation areas, alpines live in extreme cold temperatures and must potentially endure extreme cold conditions. Which begs the question, how do they survive in such a harsh environment? Well, over time, the alpine plants have evolved a special system to address their needs. In addition, they have adopted some highly adaptive regrow capacity. For example, many alpine plants have tough, wiry branches, with a dense biomass at the tip to reduce wind weathering. Also, in extreme low temperature, alpine plants can dehydrate and move water into cellular space. This prevents any serious damage to the plant by allowing the outside of the plant to freeze, while the inside stays healthy. The other interesting feature of the alpine plant is the ability to restore its organs. After all the freezing prevention, if there is still some internal damage, the alpine plant has the ability to regrow its organs. Ultimately, the alpine plants have adapted to the alpine climates, where they can survive in any cold and windy conditions.
Alright, you can probably tell that this lecture and question belongs to the first type. So we will have to summarize the two concepts mentioned by the professor using our own words. Let's hear a sample response first.
The lecture is about evolutionary adaptation to weather conditions. The professor talks about two adaptations that alpine plants have developed to survive in extremely cold temperatures. The first adaptation developed by alpine plants is their dense leaves. The plant leaves evolved to be dense so that they can withstand high wind speeds. In addition, the plants can dehydrate and move water to prevent their internal organs from freezing and causing serious damage. The second adaptation is the ability to reproduce internal organs. The plants do not always succeed in preventing their internal organs from freezing, so they have evolved a special system to regrow any damaged organs. Ultimately, the alpine plants are able to survive extremely cold temperatures with these two adaptations.
Okay, let's analyze this response. The speaker starts the response by saying, the lecture is about evolutionary adaptation to weather conditions. This is a great beginning because it talks about the main idea of the lecture right off the bat. In speaking task 6, you can always begin your response by saying, the lecture is about, and then state the topic of the lecture. Next, the speaker says, the professor talks about two adaptations that alpine plants have developed to survive in extremely cold temperatures. You can use this and similar sentences to rephrase the question to show that you understand your task. Other sentences could be, the professor talked about two adaptations that alpine plants have developed to endure in extremely cold climates. Or, the lecturer is talking about how alpine plants have adapted to endure extreme colds and mentions two examples for this. Okay, then the speaker talks about the two adaptations. The first adaptation developed by alpine plants is their dense leaves. The second adaptation is the ability to reproduce internal organs. Finally, the speaker concludes the response. So, biology topics are actually very typical for speaking task 6. You are likely to find other questions on evolution and adaptations of species to their environment in your TOEFL exam. Now, let's look at another question which also asks you to discuss two subjects mentioned in the lecture.
One of the reasons why America has such a rapidly growing economy was the emergence of railroads. By the 1840s, railroads were beginning to emerge in America. This was a period in which the railroad industry emerged as America's first big business. It gave hundreds of thousands of Americans steady employment and created capital markets and mechanisms of finance. How did railroad create such an impact on economy and business? In summary, there are two primary reasons behind it. First of all, railroads opened the channels for businessmen to sell their products. Before the advent of railroads, businesses could only target customers within their reach. What I mean is, they could only sell products as far as their carriages would take them. However, with railroads, transportation was much more convenient and faster. They could carry larger quantities of products across the country. Secondly, railroads provided cheap transportation. This gave businesses more choices to where they could build their factories. For example, a company that relies on coal to manufacture products had to open their factory near the coal mine before. Now with the railroad, they can choose to have their factory built somewhere else, because they can rely on the railroad to transport the coal for them.
Before listening to the sample answer, I suggest you pause this video and try giving your own response first. Remember to set a timer for 60 seconds so that you can get used to that time frame and prepare for your actual TOEFL exam. Now, I'm going to show you a sample answer.
The lecture is about the beginning of the railroad system in America. The professor talks about two reasons why the railroad led to the growing economy in the 17th century. First, railroads opened new pathways for businesses. Whereas a business could previously only sell locally because of the time it took to transport goods, now they could sell their products all across the country because they could transport goods and even employees anywhere they pleased. Second, the use of transportation gave businesses more options. Rather than needing to centralize industries around the raw materials for creating something, a business could ship coal, wood, or other resources to their manufacturing plant, then make their products, then ship it somewhere else entirely. For these two reasons, the railroad contributed to the rapidly growing economy in America in the 17th century.
As you can see, the structure and phrases are similar to our first sample response. It starts with, the lecture is about the beginnings of the railroad system in America. Then it says that there are two reasons for why the railroad had a major impact on economic growth in the 17th century. Then the speaker goes on and discusses the two reasons in detail. The first reason is, railroads opened new pathways for business. And the second reason is, the use of transportation gave businesses more options. Finally, he concludes the response by saying, for these two reasons, the railroad contributed to the rapidly growing economy in America in the 17th century. Okay, I think you got the hang of it. Next, I'm going to show you a speaking task 6 question where the lecturer explains one subject with 2 examples. Here is the question.
Today we can see many examples of camouflage in wildlife. Many species genetically develop camouflage mechanisms in order to hide from predators. Leafy sea dragons are very well disguised creatures. The sea dragons have appendages all over their bodies that are shaped like leaves. This feature allows them to blend in with the seaweed and kelp of its environment, so predators will fail to recognize them as prey. In addition, the camouflage helps the leafy sea dragons prey on smaller ocean creatures, such as crustaceans. Since the sea dragons are so well hidden in their environment, they have no known natural predators. Another example of camouflage is the cuttlefish. They can change their color and blend in with their surrounding environment to disguise themselves from predators. Deep below the layers of the cuttlefish's skin lie different pigments. By changing these pigments, cuttlefish are able to alter their skin color to blend in with different environments.
So, if the question asks you to explain one subject with 2 examples, you can use the following template to form your response. You can start your response similar to the other questions we've just discussed. So you can say, the lecture is about, and a sentence like the professor uses 2 examples to demonstrate in the beginning. Then you can go over to the 2 examples. For example, by saying in the first example or in the second example. In the end, you can conclude your response by using in summary, therefore, or ultimately. The template is quite straightforward. So let's listen to a sample answer using this template.
The lecture is about animal camouflage. The professor uses 2 examples to demonstrate how animals use camouflage to hide from predators. In the first example, the leafy sea dragon blends into the seaweed with its body that is shaped like a leaf. This way, predators fail to recognize the sea dragon in a bush of seaweed. The professor also mentions that because the sea dragons are so well hidden in the surrounding seaweed, they have no known natural predators. In the second example, the cuttlefish disguises themselves from predators by using special pigments under their skin. With these genetically inherited pigments, they can change color and light anytime to blend in with their surroundings. Ultimately, both animals use camouflage for protection. However, each has a different way of camouflaging itself.
Alright, this is the end of our video today. We have showed you 2 common types of questions that are likely to show up in Speaking Task 6 of your TOEFL exam. We've also told you how you can structure your response to these questions. Next to that, probably the most difficult part is to clearly understand the definitions and examples given in the lecture, and to be able to summarize the main points. To achieve that, you need to practice many sample questions on different academic subjects. You will find that there is some academic vocabulary that often comes up in these lectures. For example, the word adapt and adaptations are often used in biology lectures. It can help to read articles on various scientific topics to have a better feeling for this kind of vocabulary. You can practice more TOEFL Integrated Speaking Task 6 questions and check out our vocabulary videos for more input as well. We have even more content and exercises on our website www.bestmytest.com. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channels. Feel free to leave us a comment and your questions below as well. This is Joe from BestMyTest, and I'm saying goodbye for today.